Hey animal enthusiasts and pet hobbyists, it's Joel here again, and today I'm going to be showing you how I would normally do a water change on the Nano Saltwater Aquarium. Alright, so before I do anything, this is just what I like to do. I don't know if everybody does this, but I always like to give my hands a quick wash before I touch any of the equipment, just to reduce the chances of adding any pathogens to my tank, because I don't like to do that. But yeah, so I'm gonna just go over the equipment I like to use. Number one, I like to use a turkey baster. This is like one of the most necessary tools I need for doing water changes. Of course, you need a hydrometer for checking your salinity. Cups are kind of optional. A brush to sort of like scrub off some of the algae on the front. And then over here, you're obviously gonna need a bucket. And then this is my siphon, essentially, which is just a tube because this is a really small tank. So yeah, I'm gonna go into it. Alright, so first off, I'm going to remove the top of the aquarium. Let any of that evaporation drip off. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to blow any of the live rock and take off all the debris and detritus that could be settling on it. And I'm also going to stir up the sand bed, because if you could see all this cyanobacteria is just starting to pile up because of all the detritus that's settled down there, and we don't want that. Then what happens with all of this floating detritus is some of it should get sucked up by the filter, and by the end, when I'm done with the water change, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the filter and I'm going to clean off the sponge a little bit, but I'm going to go into depth a little bit about that later. So for the sand, I like to use the turkey baster 2. I just like to blow off any of the debris and detritus that could be forming right here. And then I like to just suck up a bit of the sand just to remove all the organics. And then this will disturb the sand bed, and it'll make it a little bit harder for the cyanobacteria to cope with this constant movement of the detritus. But the thing about cyanobacteria is that since it is a bacteria, if you know anything about bacteria, is that it could reproduce very quickly. There are some species of bacteria that they're capable of dividing or doubling their population in 4 minutes. And stir it up a little bit. And you can see all of this debris is actually good for some of the filter feeding marine inverts, such as my feather dusters. They'll eat all the detritus floating in the water column, along with the Gargonian and other of my softies that'll eat it too. So just like that. And this is sort of like what happens in nature whenever there's a large storm coming into a coral reef. Then a lot of that debris will just blast over all the corals, and they get something to eat. You can see it hasn't caused any stress to my zoanthids too much. It's pretty early in the morning. I just turned on the light about 30 minutes ago, so Some of the corals are still sort of waking up. When I'm blowing, I also like to sort of suck up some of the particles. You see right here, I was able to suck up a large piece of cyanobacteria. And I'm just going to put this in the bucket as well. I just fixed up a little bit of the feather duster tube right here because it was falling over. But so now I'm just blowing off some of the cyanobacteria. It's starting to grow over these tubes. Alright, so for the most part, that's as far as blasting with the turkey baster goes. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tube as a siphon. What I like to do is I like to cover the end with my thumb and use this part to suck up some water. And I put it inside the bucket. Then I let it fill up and make it drop down. Keep filling it up. Towels would be useful in this because a lot of it does drip out. You just keep doing this. And then you just keep doing it until you create a siphon. And just like that, you're good. Now with this, you could try to suck up more stuff. Especially around the rock work. I like to do a good 50%. This around everywhere. And that, for the most part, is about 50%, I'd say. Maybe a little bit less, but that's okay. There's all the water. Alright, I actually forgot to show this, but I like to scrub off the algae when there's no water because it allows the cells to attach to the brush instead of actually falling in the water. And then every time I brush the front panels, I just rinse it off in the water that I just removed, and then take off all those dead cells of algae, and just keep doing it until you're liking. And I don't mind algae growing on the back or on the rockwork because that's more natural and it makes a more naturalistic look, as well as it helps remove phosphates and nitrates. But the only part that I don't like it being on is the front because that hinders the view of the aquarium, of course. That's what I don't like. But yeah, so just keep doing this wherever you like. Rinse it off in the water. And you could also do it in the water, but we just removed most of the water from it. So the cells will probably attach itself to somewhere else, which is okay. I also have this magnet algae scrubber, but it doesn't work as well because of the bow front of the aquarium, so I don't really like to use it that much. Alright, so the next step that I like to do is I like to remove the internal filter that I have right here, and I like to clean the sponge because I just blasted all the live rock and the sand, and most of the particles just got sucked up into it. So that means that most of the debris are going to be inside of the filter sponge. And what I like to do is, in order to not kill off any of the bacteria, I need to put it in the same water that I just removed. So I'm going to put it into this bucket And I'm just going to squeeze it off. And I don't want to remove too much beneficial bacteria because that can cause an ammonia spike. But the thing is that bacteria, the reason it's safe, I'd say, is because the bacteria is very good at reproducing. They reproduce very fast. But as long as you don't feed your tank really soon after you just did this, everything should be fine as long as you allow the bacteria to reach its carrying capacity again, so that it'll maintain a healthy aquarium without having any ammonia spikes. Then it should be fine. So yeah, I'm just going to do that right now. Going to unplug it and take it off. Alright, so I got the internal filter right here. This is the same tank water, so the bacteria should survive. And here's the filter sponge. Now you want to make sure that you don't see any bristleworms. I learned that the hard way, because removing any of, or squeezing the sponge without looking at the bristleworms could be pretty painful. Now all you got to do is just squeeze out all of this detritus and decaying organics, and this is what holds most of the nitrates and phosphates in the water. So once you do this, the water is going to become pristine again, and it's going to reduce all of those nitrates and phosphates. Now it also has an activated carbon chamber in it, but I only like to change it every 3 weeks, and I just did that last week, so I'm not going to do it again. Now the thing is about doing this is that it does remove some of the bacteria, but as long as you give it some time to recolonize and you don't feed the tank with anything, then it should regrow fairly quick and there won't be any ammonia spikes. And also, I have the hang-on back filter in the back that I rarely change. I only do it a couple times, maybe like once a month, but you never want to do it at the same time. You never want to clean both the filters, because that'll remove way more of the bacteria, and that could be pretty dangerous. But yeah, so that's basically all I had to do. As you can see, the water in the bucket is pretty cloudy now because of all the detritus build up. And now I'm just going to put this filter back into the main display tank. Right, so there's some of the cloudy, dirty water, and I'm going to remove this. But while I'm doing that, as you can see, some of the live rock is exposed to air, and we don't want that drying out, so I'm just going to be slightly wetting it. We don't want to lose any of the bacteria that's already colonized it, because I'm just turning this piece of live rock live again with purple coralline and some bacteria. So there's that. And now, once I remove this water, I'm going to add more new water that's clean. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the new water into the aquarium. And this I just got from my local fish store. I like to refill it now. I used to mix my own salt water with Instant Ocean and distilled water, but that became quite a bit of a hassle because I didn't really have enough time to fully dissolve everything. So now what I like to do is I just like to, before I actually add it, I just like to stir it up a bit with my turkey baster, just allow it to get some access to oxygen, and because maybe some of the trace elements just settle to the bottom, so I'm just going to allow it to get exposure to oxygen, maybe raise the pH a little bit. But yeah, so before I actually add it to the tank, I'm going to add it into the same bucket that I used to remove the old water. But what I like to do is I like to, since this is a nano aquarium and the water does raise in salinity a lot of the times because of all the evaporation happening, and I don't really have enough time to do full auto top-offs, or to do top-offs. So what I like to do is I like to lower the salinity in here. The local fish store keeps it at around 1.023, but I usually like to bring it down to about 1.020, so that once it mixes with the already added water, or the water already in here, then it'll help keep the salinity in balance and not fluctuate too high or too low. So yeah, I'm going to do that. Right, so I'm going to check salinity. I think this is pretty accurate, but let's hit it a few times. Yeah, so between 1.021 and 1.020, I think that's a really good area for replenishing all the water that just evaporated. So yeah, I'm just going to be adding it to a cup and keep on pouring it into the tank, and I'm just going to refill it. Alright guys, so I just added all of the water. As you can see, I like to fill it up to about slightly lower than where the hang-on back filter adds the water or flows along with the internal filter. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did. As long as you don't see any of the inverts or the corals unhappy, like shriveled up, and everything should be fine. The peppermint shrimp just went behind the rock for some reason. But yeah, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off the glass, because as you can see, I made quite a bit of a mess adding the water. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that right now. And I'm also going to add the top back on. So yeah. Alright guys, so there it is. I tried to clean up as much of the water that went onto the acrylic as much as possible. But the thing about this is that acrylic tanks, they get scratched really easily, and I got this because it was the cheapest tank, and as you can see, there are a lot of marks and scratches on it. But it's okay, I still like the view. So yeah, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to test the salinity to make sure that it's at where I want. And yeah, so I'm pretty much done. Right, so I think I got it perfectly. It's around the 1.022 to 1.023 end. But yeah, so that's my salinity. The bacteria that I got rid of from the sponge filter should colonize pretty quickly. I'm not going to feed the tank for a couple of hours just so that I can make sure that the bacteria reaches its carrying capacity again, because if I do feed the tank, it'll more than likely cause an ammonia spike. But yeah, it should only take a couple of hours because bacteria could double its population in like 20 minutes. So I spent around a good hour just doing a water change on this one aquarium. And if you're passionate about reef keeping and these animals, then you're willing to do whatever it takes and spending a lot of time with the aquarium just like me. So I like to do that. I could have done it a lot quicker if I used different methods, but I just like to do it like this. And the reason why I was actually just adding cup one by one when I was refilling the tank was because in an aquarium this small, like the parameters fluctuate quite easily, and doing that allows them to slowly acclimate to the new parameters, which with the reduced nitrates and reduced phosphates. But yeah. Alright guys, so that's how I would do a normal weekly water change on this Nano Saltwater Reef Aquarium. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.